Ladies and gentlemen, act as if everything always works out, beloved. Life has a way of whispering fear into the fragile corners of our minds. Storms rise, dreams tremble, and the road ahead sometimes looks more like a question mark than a promise. But hear me now. Faith is not the absence of trouble. Faith is the presence of trust. When you walk with God, you can act as if everything always works out. Not because you're naive, not because you ignore reality, but because you know who holds reality in His hands. Faith is a choice before it is a feeling. Act as if God is already at work. Faith begins long before the heart feels steady or the path looks clear. It is a decision planted deep within the will, a deliberate turning of the soul toward trust, even while the emotions are trembling. Many people wait for reassurance before they take a step of faith. They wait for a sign, a surge of confidence, a sense of peace that wraps around them like a warm blanket. But genuine faith does not begin with a feeling. It begins with a choice. It begins when a person stands in the middle of uncertainty and whispers, "God is already working, even if I cannot see it yet." Feelings are wonderful gifts, but they are unreliable guides. They shift with the weather, with the moods of the moment, and with the circumstances that rise and fall like waves. If you try to build your life on feelings, your foundation will shake every time the wind blows. But when you choose to act in faith, you anchor yourself not to the instability of emotion, but to the unchanging character of God. Faith says, "I choose to believe God's hand is here, moving behind the scenes, opening doors I cannot yet see, arranging outcomes that will reveal His wisdom in time." And then, based on that conviction, you take the next step. There is a quiet, powerful beauty in choosing faith before you feel it. Anyone can trust when life is smooth and blessings are overflowing, but it is in the moments of discomfort and confusion, when the path is dim, when prayers seem unanswered, when fear breathes down your neck, that faith becomes a sacred act of courage. By choosing to believe before you feel, you are declaring that God is active even when He appears silent. You are choosing to treat His promises as more trustworthy than your emotions. Acting as though God is already at work is not about pretending your circumstances are perfect or ignoring the challenges in front of you. It is not blind optimism or shallow cheerfulness. It is the deep conviction that God works within every detail, every delay, every detour. When you act as if God is already at work, you shift your posture from fear to expectancy. You step into each day not as a victim of circumstances, but as a participant in a divine plan unfolding with purpose. When you choose faith before feeling, you also give your emotions permission to catch up. Much like warming your hands by a fire, the heart warms slowly when the will leads. Some days, your feelings may lag behind your obedience, but eventually they align with the truth you are choosing to live by. Faith lights a candle in the darkness, and the warmth of that light eventually reaches every part of your being. Choosing faith first means speaking words that reflect trust rather than fear. It means praying with expectation rather than doubt. It means approaching your tasks with the belief that God is empowering your steps. It means making decisions based not on anxiety, but on the assurance that God is guiding the process. When you act this way, you are not being unrealistic. You are recognizing the invisible reality of divine involvement. Sometimes God stretches your faith precisely by allowing you to feel nothing at all before you step forward. That step, taken in obedience, becomes the place where He reveals His presence. Think about the difference this makes in the everyday battles of life. When you wake up discouraged but choose to act as if God is already strengthening you, you rise with a different spirit. When you face a difficult conversation but choose to act as if God is already giving you wisdom, your words become clearer and kinder. When you approach a new opportunity with trembling fear, but choose to act as if God has already prepared the way, your courage grows. When you face a setback and choose to act as if God is already weaving it into something redemptive, your hope becomes resilient. This attitude creates a pattern in the heart. Over time, your instinct shifts. Instead of reacting from panic, you begin responding from trust. Instead of expecting the worst, you look for God's fingerprints in every moment. Instead of seeing obstacles as threats, you recognize them as invitations to witness God's movement. When you live with this posture, life no longer feels random or frightening. It becomes a partnership between your obedience and God's orchestration. Acting as though God is already at work also changes the atmosphere around you. People notice when someone moves with quiet confidence. They notice the calmness, the optimism rooted not in denial but in divine assurance. This kind of faith becomes a testimony without words, a living sermon that speaks louder than any speech. Others begin to wonder what anchor you have found, what foundation you are standing on, and the answer is simple. You are living as though God's hand is already writing the next chapter. The truth is, God is always at work. Long before you prayed, He knew your need. Long before you took a step, He prepared the ground beneath your feet. Long before you faced the challenge, He crafted the strength you would need. Faith simply aligns your actions with this eternal truth. It teaches you that you are not walking into uncertainty alone. You are stepping into a story already in progress, guided by a God who never abandons His children. So choose faith, not because you feel brave, not because the path is clear, but because God is faithful. Act as if He is already moving, already providing, already healing, already opening doors, already turning things for good, because He is. And when you choose this way of living, the feelings you long for, peace, courage, assurance, will follow like shadows in the light of your obedience. Your perspective shapes your path. See through the eyes of trust, not fear. Your perspective is one of the most powerful forces shaping the direction of your life. Two people can stand before the same mountain, face the same challenge, and yet walk away with opposite conclusions. One sees an obstacle too large to overcome. The other sees an opportunity waiting to be claimed. The difference is not the mountain, but the mindset. The eyes you choose to look through, eyes of fear or eyes of trust, determine the steps you take, the decisions you make, and ultimately the destination you reach. Perspective is not merely what you see. It is how you interpret what you see. Fear is clever. It knows how to magnify shadows, distort possibilities, and convince you that danger is always lurking just beneath the surface of your dreams. It does not need evidence. It only needs imagination, and it often uses your own thoughts to work against you. Fear whispers worst case scenarios, paints dark outcomes, and makes the future feel like a threat rather than a promise. When you look through the eyes of fear, even small challenges look overwhelming, and even blessed moments feel fragile. Fear shrinks your courage, limits your choices, and bends your path toward caution instead of growth. Trust, however, looks at the same world with a completely different lens. Trust is not blind or naive. It is grounded in the belief that God is present, purposeful, and active. When you see through the eyes of trust, the world does not become easier, but it becomes clearer. Challenges no longer appear as destructive forces, but as shaping forces. Delays no longer feel like punishments, but like preparation. The unknown no longer feels like a threat, but like the doorway to something God has already arranged. Trust lifts the fog so you can see beyond the moment, beyond the fear, and into the purpose behind it all. Perspective shapes your path because it shapes your choices. A fearful perspective pushes you to avoid, retreat, and hesitate. A trusting perspective inspires you to advance, endure, and believe. What you choose to focus on grows. If you focus on fear, it becomes the ruler of your decisions. If you focus on trust, it becomes the guide for your journey. The mind is like a lens, and you control the settings. You decide whether the scene becomes dim and distorted or whether it becomes sharp and hopeful. Many people wait for their situation to improve before shifting their perspective. But perspective must change first. The heart must learn how to see differently before the path becomes different. Trusting God does not begin when the storm calms. It begins in the middle of the storm. It begins when you choose to believe that beneath the chaos, His order is at work. Trust says, I may not know the outcome, but I know the one who controls it. And that single conviction shifts the entire direction of your steps. When you choose to see through the eyes of trust, you begin to notice things fear always blinded you to. You notice small signs of God's provision, tiny blessings tucked inside ordinary moments, doors you might have walked past if you had been looking only for threats. Trust makes you more alert, not less, more aware of divine possibilities, more sensitive to spiritual truths, more receptive to guidance. Fear closes the heart. Trust opens it. Your perspective also shapes the way you interpret the past. Through the eyes of fear, yesterday's failures become proof that you are doomed to fall again. But through the eyes of trust, those failures become testimonies of lessons learned, strength gained, and resilience forged. Through the eyes of fear, past hurts feel like warnings not to try again. Through the eyes of trust, those hurts become reminders of how God healed you, carried you, and shaped you into someone wiser and stronger. The difference between someone who moves forward and someone who stays stuck is not the amount of fear they feel, but the perspective they choose to adopt. Even the strongest believers feel fear. Even the bravest hearts tremble. But those who walk in trust refuse to let fear be the final voice. They acknowledge the fear, but they do not bow to it. They hear its warnings, but they choose the voice of faith. They look at the same mountain, but they climb anyway, not because they are fearless, but because they trust the God who goes before them. Seeing through the eyes of trust also means interpreting your present moment differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Trust asks, "What is God shaping within me through this?" Fear makes you feel like life is happening against you. Trust helps you see that life may be happening for you, building muscles you would never grow in comfort. developing maturity you would never gain in ease, and preparing opportunities you would never reach without the challenges you face now. And when it comes to the future, your perspective becomes a compass. Fear imagines darkness at every turn, and so it leads you towards smallness and safety. But trust imagines God working in every detail, and so it leads you into growth, boldness, and obedience. Fear makes you overthink. Trust makes you take action. Fear paralyzes. Trust propels. Fear says, I don't see the way. Trust says, God sees the way and I will walk until He reveals it. Perspective is powerful because it becomes the lens through which you build your life. If you want to walk a path of strength, confidence, and purpose, you must choose the lens of trust. You must train your heart to see not only what is in front of you, but who is behind it all. When you look through the eyes of trust, the world does not suddenly lose its challenges, but it loses its power to intimidate you. You begin to move not with fear-driven hesitation, but with faith-driven assurance. So let your perspective be shaped by trust. Let your eyes look beyond the threat of the moment and into the promise of God's presence. You cannot always choose your circumstances, but you can choose how to see them. And when you choose to see through the eyes of trust, your path becomes clearer, your steps grow steadier, and your life moves in the direction of courage, purpose, and divine guidance. God's timing is perfect even when your timeline isn't. God's timing is one of the most humbling truths a person can learn. We like to move quickly. We like to plan, predict, and push forward according to our own schedules. We build our lives around clocks, calendars, and deadlines. But God does not rush when we rush, and He does not delay when we think He should hurry. He moves with flawless precision, seeing the beginning and the end in one eternal glance. His timing is not measured by minutes or months, but by purpose. And though it rarely aligns with our expectations, it is always without fail perfect. There are moments in life when you look at your circumstances and feel as though everything is behind schedule. Prayers seem unanswered, dreams seem delayed, opportunities seem distant. You wonder why God is taking so long. You wonder if He heard your prayer the first time. You wonder if maybe your hope was misplaced or your desire misunderstood. But the truth is not that God missed your deadline. It is that He is working by a different one. His timeline is crafted with infinite wisdom, shaped by a knowledge far beyond anything you can comprehend. When you trust God's timing, you begin to see delays differently. What feels like a setback might actually be protection. What looks like silence might actually be preparation. What seems like a closed door might be God keeping you from stepping into something that would have damaged you. There are blessings you may feel ready for, but God sees the unseen weight of them. He knows what you can carry now and what you must grow in before the blessing can safely rest on your shoulders. When God waits, it is never wasted time. It's easy to believe God's timing is perfect when everything happens quickly, when doors open effortlessly, when prayers are answered immediately, when opportunities seem to fall straight into your hands. Your faith feels strong. But the real test of trust comes in the waiting rooms of life. It comes when you knock and nothing opens, when you pray and nothing moves, when you plan and nothing progresses. It is there, in the stillness, in the uncertainty, that you learn to surrender your timeline and embrace His. The waiting period is not just about patience, it is about transformation. God uses time as a tool. He shapes your character in the delays. He strengthens your faith in the pauses. He deepens your dependence in the silence. When you feel like nothing is happening, something is happening within you. You grow in ways you never would have grown if everything had come instantly. Easy seasons make life comfortable, but waiting seasons make you spiritual. Waiting chisels away impatience, pride, fear, and self-reliance. It builds humility and endurance. It forces you to trust God more deeply than your preferences. Sometimes God's timing is slower because the blessing you want involves other people, and He is preparing them too. Sometimes He orchestrates events that must align perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle only He can see. Sometimes He holds you back because the place He intends to take you is not ready for you yet, or you are not quite ready for it. In every case, His timing is deliberate. Nothing in your life is random. Nothing is late. Nothing is early. Everything is woven into a divine schedule crafted with infinite precision. There is a profound peace that comes when you stop fighting God's timing and instead flow with it. You no longer feel rushed. You no longer feel frightened when life slows down. You no longer feel abandoned when answers take longer than expected. You begin to adopt the rhythm of trust, the understanding that God is working even when you cannot see His hand. When you trust His timing, the weight of anxiety begins to lift. You start to say, if it hasn't happened yet, that means it's not the right moment. And when the right moment comes, nothing will be able to stop it. One of the mistakes people often make is associating God's silence with God's absence. But silence is not absence. It is often strategy. A teacher is quietest during the test, not because they have left the room, but because they want the student to apply what they have learned. In the same way, God sometimes steps back not to abandon you, but to strengthen your spiritual muscles. By withholding immediate answers, He helps you grow into someone who does not crumble under pressure or quit when things move slowly. His timing develops you, disciplines you, and prepares you for blessings that require spiritual maturity to handle. Think of every time in your life when something didn't happen when you wanted it to, but later, you realized the timing was exactly right. Maybe a job you desperately wanted didn't work out because a better one was around the corner. Maybe a relationship ended so you could be free for the person God intended. Maybe the thing you cried over not receiving became the very thing you later thanked God for sparing you from. Hindsight often reveals what trust tries to teach in the moment. God's timing is always working for your good, even when your heart aches for immediate answers. Learning to embrace God's timing does not mean you stop dreaming or stop moving. It means you take faithful steps without forcing outcomes. You pray without demanding deadlines. You work without worrying about when the reward will come. You live with expectation rather than impatience. You trust that God knows the exact moment to open doors, shift circumstances, and release what you've been waiting for. And when His timing finally arrives, it often comes with a beauty, clarity, and ease that remind you why you had to wait. Things fall into place in a way your own efforts could never have accomplished. The blessing feels deeper, richer, and more meaningful because you grew into the person capable of receiving it. So rest in this truth. God's timing is perfect, even when your timeline isn't. What feels late to you is right on schedule with Him. What feels slow to you is moving at the speed of divine wisdom. And when the moment comes, when God says, "Now," the very things you thought were delayed will arrive with a grace that makes every second of waiting worth while. Worry is the imagination misused. Faith is imagination redeemed. Worry is a powerful force, not because it has any real strength, but because it knows how to steal the strength you already have. It doesn't build anything, it only breaks. It doesn't protect you, it only exhausts you. And yet it flourishes in the most creative part of your mind, your imagination. The same imagination that God gave you to dream, hope, envision, and create becomes the very stage where worry performs its loudest dramas. Worry rehearses disasters that never happen, paints tragedies that never unfold, and writes stories no author would dare publish. It is imagination misused, imagination taken captive by fear, imagination turned against the soul that carries it. But faith, on the other hand, uses imagination as it was meant to be used. Faith redeems imagination. Faith says, if my mind can picture failure, it can also picture God's faithfulness. If I can imagine the worst, I can imagine the best that God can do. Fear twists imagination into darkness. Faith brings imagination into the light. The difference between worry and faith is not the presence of imagination, but the direction of it. Worry imagines what God can't do. Faith imagines what God will do. Worry makes you a prisoner to possibilities that terrify you. Faith makes you a participant in possibilities that strengthen you. We all have an inner storyteller. Every day we narrate the possibilities of tomorrow. Some people let fear write the script. They let worry exaggerate every risk and highlight every unknown. Their imagination becomes a canvas covered with anxious strokes of what if. What if I fail? What if this falls apart? What if I never recover? What if I'm not enough? With every fearful thought, the imagination becomes more tangled, more narrow, more suffocating. Worry takes the creative gift meant for vision and turns it into a projector of dread. But faith steps into that same space and transforms it. Instead of what if something goes wrong, faith whispers, what if God is preparing something right? Instead of what if I'm not strong enough, faith says, what if God shows His strength through my weakness? Instead of imagining loss, faith imagines growth. Instead of imagining endings, faith imagines beginnings. It takes that same canvas and invites the Spirit to paint hope across it. Faith does not ignore reality. It reimagines it through the truth of God's character. It does not deny the existence of difficulty. It denies difficulty the power to dictate the story. When you worry, you live in a world that does not exist. You live in the shadows of possibilities that your fear created. But when you walk in faith, you live in the confidence of a reality God is shaping. Faith makes room for divine intervention. Faith stretches the borders of imagination to include the miraculous, the unexpected, the redemptive. Worry shrinks your world until all you can see is yourself. Faith expands your world until all you can see is God. Worry is exhausting because it gives your imagination an impossible job. It tries to prepare you for problems that will never come. It tries to control outcomes that were never yours to control. It tries to protect you from futures that may not even exist. But faith brings rest. Faith hands the future back to God and frees your imagination to dwell on what is true, noble, hopeful, and beautiful. Faith gives your mind permission to stop rehearsing catastrophes and start trusting divine outcomes. It tells your imagination, you no longer have to run wild in fear. You are now guided by the God who sees the end from the beginning. Imagine a person standing at the edge of a forest at night. Worry looks into the darkness and imagines danger in every shadow. It hears threats in every sound. It invents reasons to stay where it is, trembling and still. But faith looks into the same forest and imagines a path illuminated by the steps of obedience. It imagines a clearing on the other side, a sunrise waiting to break through the trees. It imagines God walking beside them, guiding each step. The forest doesn't change, only the imagination does. And that change determines whether the person stands frozen or moves forward. People often underestimate how spiritual imagination really is. Your imagination is the place where belief begins. Before a person takes a step of courage, they imagine themselves obeying. Before they surrender, they imagine the peace it might bring. Before they trust God, they imagine what life could look like in His hands. Imagination is where spiritual battles start and often where they are won or lost. This is why worry is so destructive. It attacks the very space where faith wants to plant its seeds. Faith does not mean you never feel fear. Faith means that when fear paints a picture, you hand the brush to God. You let Him rewrite the narrative. You let Him correct the colors. You let Him sketch hope where fear once sketched despair. Faith means inviting God into the imagination and letting His truth reshape your inner world. And once that inner world is transformed, the outer world begins to look different as well. When you begin to use your imagination the way faith intends, you start to see possibilities you never saw before. You begin to believe that closed doors might lead to better ones. You begin to trust that timing you don't understand might be protecting you from something you can't see. You begin to feel peace in places where worry used to dwell. You begin to carry hope in seasons where fear once ruled. Faith redeems your imagination, and imagination redeemed becomes a powerful servant of God's purpose. Worry misuses imagination. Faith redeems it. And every day, in every situation, you have the choice of which one you will empower. When you give your imagination to fear, it becomes your enemy. But when you give your imagination to God, it becomes your ally. It becomes the quiet place where courage grows, where trust deepens, where hope takes root, and where the future begins to look like something God can shape, not something you must fear. Choose faith. Let your imagination be healed. Let it dream again. Let it hope again. Let it belong to God again. Acting in faith invites divine alignment. Acting in faith is more than a spiritual gesture. It is an invitation for heaven and earth to meet in the details of your life. When you take a step based on trust rather than sight, you signal to God that you are willing to move with Him, even when you cannot trace His hand. That kind of obedience creates a powerful alignment. Your will aligns with His purpose, your actions align with His timing, and your journey aligns with His direction. Faith moves you from waiting for the perfect moment to stepping into the moment God has already prepared. When you act in faith, you do not force God's hand, but you open your life to His guidance in ways you may never have noticed otherwise. Divine alignment is not accidental. It is something that becomes clearer when your choices reflect God's truth. Many people wait for God to show every detail of the path before taking even one step. But spiritual alignment often begins when you move first. Think of it like a door that only opens when you walk toward it. The sensor does not activate when you stand across the room. It activates when you approach. Faith operates in much the same way. It is motion that reveals direction. It is obedience that reveals opportunity. It is trust that clears the fog and allows the next step to appear. When you act in fear, you often move in circles, hesitating, doubting, retreating, and revisiting the same questions again and again. But when you act in faith, your path straightens, not because life becomes easy, but because your spirit becomes aligned with God's intention. Faith clears the static. It quiets the noise. It helps you sense God's leading with sharper clarity. Suddenly, decisions that once felt confusing become clearer. Circumstances that once looked like obstacles begin to shift. People who are meant to be part of your journey appear at the right moment, while those who hinder your growth drift quietly out of your life. Faith does not simply move you forward. It positions you where God intends you to be. Divine alignment does not mean every door opens instantly. Sometimes faith leads you to knock on doors that don't open so God can lead you to the ones that will. Sometimes alignment means God closes what you thought you wanted, so He can guide you toward what you actually need. Acting in faith invites God to arrange your life according to His vision, not your limited perspective. It allows Him to correct your course gently, to nudge you in the right direction, and to prepare the right opportunities long before you arrive. Faith-based action is powerful because it demonstrates readiness. It tells God, I trust your voice more than my comfort. I trust your direction more than my understanding. When God sees a heart willing to move, He provides guidance. When He sees a spirit willing to step out, He provides strength. When He sees obedience in motion, He reveals blessings that would have remained hidden in stagnation. Faith activates spiritual momentum, and once momentum begins, miracles often follow. Acting in faith also aligns your inner world, your thoughts, emotions, and attitudes with the reality of God's promises. When you choose faith, your mind shifts from fear to expectation. Instead of imagining everything that could go wrong, you begin imagining what God could make right. Instead of rehearsing problems, you begin anticipating solutions. This inner shift is itself a form of divine alignment. God speaks most clearly to the heart that listens with trust, not worry. When your inner world is aligned with faith, you become more sensitive to God's whispers and more confident in His guidance. Faith invites alignment in relationships as well. Sometimes the bold decision to act in faith draws the right people toward you. Mentors, encouragers, partners, and friends who sharpen your purpose. Other times, faith reveals relationships that were draining your strength or distracting your focus. You begin to recognize who belongs in your life and who was only meant for a season. Acting in faith reorganizes your social environment to match your spiritual direction. Acting in faith also aligns your actions with your calling. Many people carry a sense of calling, but never step into it because they wait for absolute certainty. Yet, certainty rarely comes before faith. It comes because of faith. God often reveals the fullness of your calling only after you show you are willing to walk toward it. When you act in faith, you discover abilities you did not know you possessed, courage you did not think you had, and resources that appear just when you need them. Faith awakens competence. It awakens creativity. It awakens purpose. Suddenly, you find yourself doing things you once thought impossible, not because life became easy, but because your spirit became aligned with God's design. Divine alignment does not remove challenges, but it gives meaning to them. When you are aligned with God, even obstacles become part of your formation. Every delay carries a lesson. Every struggle shapes a strength. Every hardship builds a resilience that will serve you later. Faith does not protect you from challenges, but it ensures those challenges work for you instead of against you. When your life is aligned with God, everything good or difficult becomes part of a greater purpose. Acting in faith also aligns you with peace. The peace that comes from faith is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of confidence. It is knowing that you took the step God asked you to take. It is knowing that even if the path is unfamiliar, you are not walking it alone. Peace follows obedience. Peace follows trust. Peace follows the moment you decide to act not from fear, but from faith. And in time, alignment produces fruit. You begin to look back and see how perfectly God arranged things, how meetings happened at the right time, how open doors appeared that you never could have forced open, how opportunities fell into place only after you stepped forward, how what once seemed confusing later made perfect sense. You begin to see that divine alignment was not random, it was a response to your faith in motion. So act in faith, even if the step is small, even if the outcome is unclear, even if the timing feels uncertain. When you move in faith, heaven moves with you. When you step toward God's will, God aligns the path beneath your feet. Acting in faith invites divine alignment, and divine alignment leads you exactly where you were meant to go. Every setback becomes preparation for your comeback. There comes a moment in every life when the ground shakes, the plans crumble, and the heart whispers, "Not again." We stand in the middle of our disappointment, like a traveler stranded on a road, washed away by the storm. And in that space, where nothing looks the way we hoped, a quiet truth begins to rise. The kind of truth you don't learn in comfort, but in the shadows of trials. Every setback is not a sentence. It is a shaping. It is not a wall. It is a workshop. It is not the end. It is the preparation for a beginning far greater than the one you imagined. Setbacks feel personal, as if the whole world has leaned its weight against you. But in the eyes of God, setbacks are not punishments. They are platforms. They are not meant to bury you. They are meant to build you. Like a seed pushed into the darkness of the soil, what looks like burial is actually planting. What feels like loss is actually preparation for growth that could never happen in the light alone. The seed never knows, as it sits in silence beneath the surface, that an orchard waits inside it. And you never fully grasp, as you face the weight of delay or disappointment, that a comeback has already begun to grow in places you cannot see. Life has a way of mistaking delay for denial. We assume that if it didn't happen now, if it didn't work out as easily as we hoped, if the door didn't open the first time we knocked, then the answer must be no. But sometimes God's greatest yes arrives wrapped in what looks like a setback. The very thing you think is blocking you may be the thing preparing you. The missed opportunity might be the protection you didn't know you needed. The quiet season may be the strengthening your soul required. The closed door may not be rejection. It may be redirection. There is a refining fire in every failure, not a fire that destroys, but a fire that clarifies. It burns away the illusions that you were relying on your own strength. It melts the fear that made you think you were alone. It refines your motives, sharpens your focus, and reminds you that you are not the architect of your destiny. God is. And when He allows you to walk through a valley, it isn't because He abandoned you. It's because He's leading you toward a victory only valleys can produce. Think of the people we celebrate in Scripture. Not one of them rose without falling first. Moses failed before he led. Joseph was betrayed before he was elevated. David was chased before he was crowned. Peter sank before he preached. Paul was struck down before he stood up in power. Every hero of faith carried scars, and every scar told the same story. The place where I fell became the ground where I learned to rise. When your heart is broken, when your plans derail, when your strength runs thin, you are not being erased. You are being equipped. God never wastes pain. He never wastes disappointment. He never wastes confusion. He weaves every thread into a tapestry that only makes sense when you step back far enough to see the whole picture. You may think you're standing in the ruins of what was supposed to be, but heaven sees you standing at the construction site of what was meant to be. The comeback doesn't start when circumstances change. It starts when your perspective does. It starts when you refuse to call yourself defeated. It starts when you choose to believe that God is still writing, still working, still guiding, still aligning every detail for your good. Faith doesn't deny the presence of pain, but it refuses to surrender to it. Faith looks at the setback and says, "This is not where my story ends." Faith steps forward even when the path is unclear. Faith trusts that the author of your life has already scripted the triumph waiting on the other side of the trial. Sometimes the greatest preparation happens in the smallest, quietest moments, when all you have left is trust. Trust is the soil where resilience grows. Trust is the wind that carries you out of the storm. Trust is the anchor that keeps your soul steady when everything else shakes. When you choose trust in the middle of a setback, you invite strength into your spirit. You invite clarity into your mind. You invite courage into your next step. And soon, what was once a wound becomes a well of wisdom. Every comeback has a process, and God is faithful in every step of it. He strengthens you before He sends you. He teaches you before He uses you. He humbles you before He lifts you. The world celebrates quick success, but heaven cultivates deep roots. And sometimes your roots must grow downward before your life grows upward. So if you are walking through what feels like a setback, lift your head. This season is not a sign that God is done. It is a sign that He is preparing you for more. Let the delay deepen you. Let the hardship shape you. Let the disappointment redirect you. Let the struggle stretch you, because every setback is the soil of a future comeback. And when God brings you back stronger, wiser, steadier, you will understand why you had to walk the road you walked. You will see that nothing was wasted, and you will rise, not because circumstances changed, but because grace carried you through the very place you thought would break you. You are not finished, you are being formed, and what looks like a setback today is the seed of a comeback already on its way. You walk stronger when you walk with purpose, not panic. There is a difference between movement and progress, between pacing in fear and walking in purpose. Panic makes your feet move, but purpose gives your steps meaning. Panic rushes you, but purpose roots you. Panic clouds your vision, but purpose clears the path beneath you. And in the journey of life, the strength you carry is not measured by how fast you run, but by the clarity with which you move forward. You walk stronger when you walk with purpose, not panic, because purpose comes from conviction, while panic comes from confusion. Panic is a thief. It steals your breath, steals your confidence, steals your sense of direction. It makes you react instead of respond. It pushes you into making decisions out of fear rather than faith. When panic takes the reins of your soul, you find yourself stumbling through moments that require clarity, rushing through places meant to grow you, and clinging to assumptions that were never true. Panic whispers you're running out of time, but purpose says you are right on schedule. Panic says everything is falling apart, but purpose says everything is falling into place. Panic says you won't make it, but purpose says God is with you. Purpose steadies a heart that would otherwise tremble. When you know why you are moving, you stop being intimidated by the things that try to block your way. When your heart is anchored in something eternal, the storm can roar, the winds can shift, the path can twist, but you keep going, because the one who leads you is greater than the forces that oppose you. Purpose is not something you invent. It is something you discover. It is something planted in you long before panic ever tried to hijack your peace. And the more you learn to listen to that quiet inner voice of calling, the less control fear has over your steps. Most people do not lose strength because they are weak. They lose strength because they are pulled in too many directions by panic. Panic scatters your energy, purpose gathers it. Panic breaks your focus, purpose sharpens it. Panic makes the problem look bigger. Purpose reminds you that God is bigger than the problem. You can feel the difference in your spirit. When panic leads, everything feels urgent, chaotic, heavy, rushed. But when purpose leads, everything feels intentional. Even the challenges, even the uncertainty, even the delays. Walking with purpose does not mean you never feel afraid. It means you choose not to be governed by fear. Courage is not an absence of panic. It is a refusal to let panic dictate your decisions. You can feel fear in your body and still move forward with boldness. You can have trembling hands but steady steps. You can be unsure of the next turn while still trusting the one who guides you. Purpose doesn't silence fear, but it puts fear in its rightful place beneath your feet. Think of how a sailor moves through a storm. Panic would make him abandon the wheel, lash out at the waves, or freeze in despair. But purpose keeps him steady because he knows where he is headed. The sky can darken, the wind can howl, the waves can rise, but the sailor keeps his eye on the horizon. He is not led by the noise of the storm, but by the direction of his compass. In the same way, your life becomes strongest when you navigate by purpose instead of panic. Purpose becomes your spiritual compass, pointing you toward the life God prepared for you. Every person who has accomplished something meaningful had moments when panic tried to take over. Panic tries to talk you out of what God has called you to do. Panic tells you the mountain is too high, the task is too big, the journey is too long. But purpose whispers, one step at a time. Purpose reminds you that God never calls you to a place He hasn't already prepared. Purpose is the thread that holds your spirit together when everything else seems uncertain. Walking with purpose is not about controlling the outcome. It is about controlling your direction. It means waking up each day and choosing to move forward with intention. It means focusing on what you can do instead of fearing what you cannot. It means trusting God with the unknowns and committing yourself to what He has made clear. When your steps are guided by purpose, You walk with a strength that does not come from your own willpower, but from spiritual alignment with God's plan. Purpose is quiet, but powerful. Panic is loud, but weak. Panic demands an immediate reaction. Purpose invites a thoughtful response. Panic says hurry. Purpose says hold steady. Panic blinds you to God's presence. Purpose reveals that He has been walking beside you the entire time. When you choose purpose over panic, you begin to move with a confidence that surprises even you. You stand taller. You breathe deeper. You think clearer. You walk wiser. And something remarkable happens. Life begins to open in places where it once felt closed. Opportunities appear where you once saw obstacles. Strength rises where you once felt drained. Clarity emerges where confusion once lived. Not because everything around you changed, but because you changed. You stopped letting panic drive you. You started letting purpose lead you. So when fear tries to speed up your steps, slow down your mind. When panic says you're losing control, remember that God never did. When discouragement tugs at your heart, lift your head and remember your calling. You were not created to run in circles of anxiety. You were created to walk in steady, sacred purpose. And when you walk with purpose, you walk stronger every single time. Your attitude can be a prophecy of your future. There is a quiet power inside every human being, a power not measured by strength, wealth, or status, but by posture. Not posture of the body, but posture of the heart, attitude. It is the lens you look through, the tone you carry, the inner climate that shapes the outer world. And though we often overlook it, your attitude can become a prophecy of your future. The way you think, the way you speak, the way you interpret the world, these things whisper ahead of you, shaping the path you eventually walk. Attitude is like the wind behind a ship. You may have the strongest boat, the finest sails, and the clearest map, but if the wind blows against you, the journey becomes hard. But change the wind even slightly, and the whole direction shifts. Your attitude is that unseen wind. It either carries you toward hope, or pushes you deeper into discouragement. It becomes the invisible force that influences how you dream, how you act, how you persevere, and even how you interpret God's work in your life. People often think their future is determined by circumstances, but more often it's shaped by their responses to circumstances. Two people can face the same storm. One becomes bitter, the other becomes stronger. Two people can encounter the same delay. One grows frustrated, the other grows patient. Two people can experience the same heartbreak. One closes their heart, the other deepens it. The difference is not in what they endured, but in how they chose to see it. Your attitude becomes a silent storyteller, writing chapters in advance. Chapters you eventually step into. A defeated attitude prepares you for defeat, even before trouble arrives. A hopeful attitude prepares you for breakthrough, even before the blessing appears. It doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you refuse to surrender to a reality God has the power to change. You begin to live with the expectation that something good can rise from something hard, that something purposeful can rise from something painful, that something new can rise from something lost. And when your heart expects possibility, your life begins to move toward possibility. Attitude is a seed. Whatever you plant inside will eventually grow outside. Plant fear, and your actions shrink. Plant gratitude, and your life expands. Plant bitterness, and your world becomes heavy. Plant faith, and your world becomes hopeful. It is impossible to cultivate a negative inner world and reap a positive outer future. And it is equally impossible to nurture a faithful, patient, humble attitude and not see it eventually transform the course of your life. What grows within the heart over time becomes the harvest of your story. This is why Scripture so often speaks about the renewing of the mind. God knows that even if He opens doors for you, you will not walk through them with a defeated attitude. He knows that even if He gives you opportunities, a fearful attitude will talk you out of them. He knows that even when He prepares blessings, a bitter attitude may blind you to them. Your attitude becomes the interpreter of your destiny. It colors how you see God, how you see yourself, and how you see your future. Think of the 12 spies Moses sent into Canaan. 10 walked into the land with a fearful attitude and saw giants bigger than God's promise. 2 walked in with faith and saw a promise bigger than the giants. Their attitudes shaped 2 entirely different futures. The fearful lived out their prophecy. They wandered in the wilderness until they died. The faithful lived out theirs. They entered a land flowing with promise. Same land, same circumstances, same view. Yet completely different futures because of the attitudes they cultivated. Attitude is not merely a feeling, it is a decision. It is a choice you make when the alarm rings in the morning, when conflict arises, when disappointment knocks, when uncertainty lingers. You may not control everything that comes to you, but you can choose what grows within you. You can decide whether you will allow negativity to poison your spirit, or whether you will choose to stand in the light of possibility. And every day you choose hope. You prophesy hope into your future. Every day you choose gratitude. You prophesy blessings into your future. Every day you choose faith. You prophesy spiritual strength into your future. A blessed future rarely grows from a bitter attitude. A joyful future rarely grows from a complaining heart. A peaceful future rarely grows from a restless spirit. But a strong attitude, one grounded in grace, anchored in faith, shaped by humility and hope, creates a future worthy of the person God designed you to become. Even in hard seasons, attitude speaks. When life feels heavy, your attitude can say, "I will rise again." When delays stretch longer than expected, your attitude can whisper, "My timing isn't wasted." When doors close unexpectedly, your attitude can declare, "Another door is being prepared." When you feel insufficient, your attitude can remind you, "God is my strength." And soon, what started as a whisper becomes a conviction, then a habit, then a destiny. The most beautiful thing about attitude is that it is fully within your power to change. You don't need better circumstances to shift it. You need better beliefs. You don't need everything to go right before you choose gratitude. You choose gratitude, and your perspective begins to go right. You don't need perfect clarity before you choose peace. You choose peace, and clarity begins to form. You don't need the future to reveal itself before you choose hope. You choose hope, and the future becomes brighter. Attitude is your daily prophecy, and you are the author of that prophecy, under the guidance of a God who works all things for good. Shape your attitude with intention, and your future will rise to meet it. Walk with a spirit of faith, and your life will follow its direction. Speak with expectancy, and doors you once feared will open. Carry a posture of humility and courage, and you will attract the opportunities meant for you. Your future listens to the tone of your heart. So choose the attitude that aligns with the future you desire. Choose the attitude that honors the God who directs your steps. Choose the attitude that strengthens you for the journey ahead. Because your attitude is not simply how you feel today. It is the prophecy of who you will become tomorrow. Grace fills the gaps where your strength fails. There comes a point in every journey where human strength reaches its edge. No matter how determined, disciplined, or courageous a person may be, life has a way of bringing us to moments we cannot carry alone. We try, we strive, we hold on with trembling hands, but eventually the weight becomes too heavy, the climb becomes too steep, the wound becomes too deep. And it is in that place where strength ends that grace begins. Grace fills the gaps where your strength fails, not as an admission of weakness, but as a reminder that you were never meant to walk this life depending solely on yourself. Grace is the gentle hand that meets you when you fall short. It is the quiet reassurance whispering, "You don't have to be enough, because God is." Grace does not demand perfection. It invites surrender. It does not scold your limitations. It covers them. When your strength reaches its limit, grace steps in not reluctantly, not sparingly, but abundantly, willingly, and with divine tenderness. Grace does not arrive as a backup plan. It arrives as the plan that was always meant to sustain you. Most people spend their lives believing they must earn their worth through effort, performance, or achievement. They push themselves until exhaustion becomes familiar, believing that if they just tried harder, they could fill every gap in their life. But the truth is simple. Human strength was never designed to be flawless. It was designed to point you toward the one who is flawless. Your limitations are not failures, they are invitations. They invite grace to do what strength cannot. They turn your eyes from your own abilities to the God whose power is made perfect in weakness. Grace shows up in the moments you think you've ruined everything, in the decisions you regret, in the words you wish you could take back, in the mistakes you thought disqualified you. Grace steps into the mess without hesitation. It doesn't sidestep your brokenness. It walks into it with healing. Grace sees the places where you lack patience, where you lack wisdom, where you lack courage, where you lack love, and it fills those places, pouring strength into the cracks of your humanity. Grace is not a soft excuse for failure. It is a divine power that lifts you beyond what you could ever achieve alone. It enables you to forgive when your heart wants to hold on to hurt. It empowers you to rise when every emotion tells you to give up. It gives you peace when your mind spins with worry. Grace is strength borrowed from heaven, given freely in moments when earth's strength is not enough. When you are exhausted from trying to be everything for everyone, grace whispers, rest. When you are drowning in pressure, grace says, you don't have to prove anything. When you are overwhelmed by fear, grace says, my presence goes with you. When you fail, grace says, this is not the end. When you doubt yourself, grace says, you are held. And when you reach the point where you can't take another step, grace becomes the strength that carries you. Think of a child learning to walk. The child stumbles, falls, reaches up with shaking arms. The parent does not scold the child for being weak. The parent lifts them, steadies them, encourages them. This is how grace works. It meets you in the trembling, steadies you in the uncertainty, and walks with you until your feet regain strength. It is a love that does not withdraw when you falter. It stays. It supports. It sustains. Life demands more than your strength can supply. You face seasons where the responsibilities outweigh your stamina, where the grief outweighs your peace, where the questions outweigh your understanding. In those moments, grace becomes the bridge. It stretches across the distance between what you can do and what needs to be done. It fills the gap between your fear and your calling, between your weakness and your purpose, between your brokenness and your healing. The beauty of grace is that it does not wait for you to have it all together. It meets you exactly where you are, shaky, tired, flawed, and it lifts you higher than strength alone could ever take you. Grace doesn't just patch the holes, it transforms the heart. It teaches you that dependence is not defeat, and surrender is not failure. Grace frees you from the exhausting burden of believing you must carry everything yourself. And the truth is, the moments when your strength fails are often the moments when you encounter God most deeply. When you finally stop striving, you start receiving. When you release control, peace enters. When you admit your weakness, you meet His strength. Grace becomes real not when you feel powerful, but when you feel powerless. It becomes visible not in the victories you create, but in the victories God brings through your willing, surrendered heart. You were never designed to be self-sufficient. You were designed to be God-dependent. Grace is the power that fills the empty spaces your humanity leaves behind. It fills them with courage you didn't know you had, wisdom you didn't know you needed, peace you didn't know was possible. It fills them with divine strength tailor-made for your struggle. So when your strength fails, and it will, do not despair. The failing of your strength is not the end of the story. It is the doorway to grace. It is the moment where heaven steps into your humanity. Let grace fill the gaps. Let grace carry what you cannot. Let grace become the stream of strength that flows through the desert of your limitations. Because grace does not simply mend the broken, it empowers the redeemed. And where your strength ends, grace begins its most beautiful work. Live as though victory is certain, because with God it is. Life has a way of testing faith, stretching patience, and confronting the heart with uncertainty. Challenges rise like mountains, storms rage without warning, and obstacles appear that seem larger than our strength, more complex than our understanding, and more intimidating than our courage. In these moments, it is easy to shrink, to hesitate, to doubt, and to question whether victory is truly possible. Yet the call of faith is clear. Live as though victory is certain, because with God it is. Victory is not simply a distant hope. It is a divine promise. It is not conditional on human ability. It is rooted in God's unchanging power, wisdom, and love. When you embrace this truth, you begin to see life from a perspective beyond fear, beyond limitation, beyond the chaos of circumstance. To live as though victory is certain is not to deny difficulty. It is not to act as if challenges do not exist. It is not to pretend that everything is already solved. It is to recognize that even in the midst of struggle, God is orchestrating a plan that cannot fail. Victory does not depend on timing, luck, or human skill alone. It depends on the one who controls all things. When your confidence rests on God, every obstacle becomes a stepping stone, every delay becomes preparation, and every setback becomes temporary. The certainty of victory transforms the way you walk, the way you speak, and the way you think. Faith shapes reality in ways that the human mind cannot always perceive. The soldier who enters battle without fear is not reckless. He is confident in his training and his mission. The entrepreneur who pursues a dream against the odds is not naive. He is confident in his preparation and guidance. Likewise, the believer who lives with the expectation of victory is not deluded. He is confident in God. This confidence does not remove resistance, but it removes despair. It does not erase difficulty, but it strengthens perseverance. Victory becomes a certainty, not because life is easy, but because God's power is greater than every challenge you face. To live in certainty of victory is to walk with unwavering purpose. When the heart believes it will prevail, hesitation disappears. When the spirit trusts it will overcome, fear loses its grip. When the mind knows that God has already won the ultimate battle, worry loses its weight. This certainty allows you to act decisively, to pursue opportunities boldly, and to respond to trials with calm assurance. It transforms ordinary actions into steps that align with divine destiny. Each choice, each word, each effort becomes intentional because it is powered by faith rather than doubt. Victory in life is rarely immediate or effortless. Often, it comes through struggle, endurance, and perseverance. But the believer who lives as though victory is certain understands that struggle does not equate to failure. Every challenge is a rehearsal, every trial a training ground, and every obstacle an opportunity for God to demonstrate His power. The certainty of victory shapes the heart to embrace persistence, courage, and patience. It transforms waiting into preparation and difficulty into triumph. It teaches the soul that endurance is part of the journey and that victory is part of the promise. Living in this certainty also changes the way we perceive setbacks. What others see as defeat, the believer sees as a stepping stone. What looks like delay is actually alignment. What feels like impossibility is actually preparation for God to act. When you operate with the expectation of victory, you refuse to allow temporary circumstances to dictate your hope. You refuse to let fear determine your choices. You refuse to surrender to the narrative of defeat. Instead, you step forward with confidence, knowing that every battle has already been won in the eternal plan of God. Victory is not only personal, it is spiritual. It is the triumph of faith over doubt, obedience over fear, hope over despair, and life over death. With God, the ultimate victory is certain. And when you live as though that victory is already yours, your present life begins to reflect that reality. You become a person who inspires others, who encourages those around you, and who walks through trials with the calm authority of one who knows the end of the story. Your confidence does not depend on circumstances. It depends on the eternal truth that God never fails. Certainty of victory also produces peace. The believer who trusts in God's outcome experiences a freedom that others do not. They do not panic over challenges. They do not obsess over setbacks. They do not allow doubt to define their actions. Instead, they live with a quiet assurance, a strength that endures, and a hope that remains unshaken. This peace is both protective and empowering. It shields the heart from fear and fuels the soul to continue in bold, confident action. Living as though victory is certain requires a shift in perspective. It requires a conscious choice to see beyond temporary circumstances, beyond fear, beyond the opinions of others. It requires belief that the one who called you, sustains you, and loves you is faithful to complete his work in your life. It requires trust that the story of your life is written by the God who turns impossibilities into triumphs, despair into hope, and weakness into strength. This perspective transforms the believer from a passive observer of life into an active participant in God's victory. Every decision, every action, every thought becomes infused with purpose when you live with the expectation of victory. Fear cannot paralyze you, obstacles cannot deter you, and uncertainty cannot mislead you. You step into challenges not with trepidation, but with confidence. You confront adversity not with anxiety, but with courage. You speak words of hope, encouragement, and faith, not only to others, but over your own life. Living in certainty of victory empowers every aspect of your being. So, choose today to live as though victory is certain. Walk boldly into your challenges, speak confidently over your circumstances, think faithfully about your future, believe unwaveringly in God's promises. Do not allow temporary setbacks to define you, do not allow fear to guide you, and do not allow doubt to limit the potential God has placed within you. With God, victory is not just possible, it is assured. And when you embrace this truth, your life becomes a testament to the power, faithfulness, and greatness of the one who guarantees triumph. And there you have it, my friends, 10 powerful truths to guide your life, to strengthen your faith, and to remind you that no matter the storms, delays, or challenges you face, God's plan for you is perfect. Remember, faith is a choice. Your perspective shapes your path. Setbacks are only preparation for your comeback, and grace fills the gaps where your strength fails. So, step forward today with confidence, walk in purpose, speak with hope, and live as though victory is certain, because with God it truly is. Let these principles not just be words you hear today, but convictions you carry into every moment of your life. Thank you for watching, thank you for believing, and thank you for letting God guide your steps. If this message has inspired you, share it, reflect on it, and most importantly, put it into practice. Remember, act as if everything always works out, because with God on your side, it does. Until next time, stay faithful, stay strong, and walk boldly in victory God has already prepared for you.